So, guys, welcome. It is January 27th, and we're on for another hot topic today, dual agency. So, thank you all for joining. By numbers, it's looking like this is something that we all are kind of curious about. So, time is appropriate. I will share with you the reason that this topic came up was in the last couple of weeks, I've actually had conversations with three of our managers to get clarity on dual agency. What, when does it occur? How does it occur? What paperwork should we have as an office? So I'm glad you're all with me. It is being recorded, and again, as well as technology works, I get them posted into what you see up here, HRC agent development. So this will also be out there as soon as I can. We'll get it posted. So if you need it for review, it will be there. Now, this will also be man, I'll tell you, when we discuss agency in any part, know that your involvement is where we get the best output from a session like this. So feel free to come off of mute when you have questions, get involved. I encourage it. And we'll run it from there. And well, let's just hit it. Here we go. I'm going to start out with a few questions. Now, these may be somewhat of a review for some of you, but what I've learned is we can't hear it enough. So, question number one, no need to answer it here, but I just want you to take in your own head or actually write down your thought. When must we disclose agency? So right now I want to create an awareness for some of my BDS folks right now. These are going to sound familiar because this was session 2 of the BDS. When must we disclose agency? And we're going to answer all these questions as we go along. Question number 2, and this is an important one. What creates an agency relationship? Now, again, just you can answer that to yourself. If you don't have a clear answer, that's what we're looking for. I want a clear answer. If I'm going, well, I think, well, good, we're here today. Question number 3, and this is the important one. And yet we needed to know the first 2 to get to the answer that we have with this one, is what creates dual agency? Okay, now again, just answer in your own mind, whatever you may have. And hopefully by the end of this, we're going to have real clarity for you in regards to what dual agency is, how it's created, how to work with it. So first part, agency disclosure. Let's see how close we come to this. We must disclose our agency relationship to all parties. So I say all parties because if you're on 2 sides, you have both sides, both parties need to have disclosure. Both the buyer and the seller need to have disclosure. And when must we do that? Prior to the exchange of any confidential information. So here's what I'm pretty certain of when I throw this up. Since 1995, every one of you have been in violation of the laws of the state of Michigan for violating by not disclosing prior to the confidential information being disclosed in writing. Therefore, you're all guilty. Sign the ticket. Or here, just hold your hand out. You ready? It's all we need on that. But here we'll keep going. Let's look at some definitions. An agency relationship exists between 2 parties when one of them, called the agent, now, and this is where sometimes this gets confusing. We have us as agents, we have brokers, an agency, supervisory brokers, which is an agent. You with me on this? Make sure that we separate the terms. In the case of Looking at agency, the agent acts on behalf of, the broker acts on behalf of, the supervisory broker acts on behalf of, or represents the other, which is known as the principal. That would be our buyer or our seller. So, what creates an agency relationship? I'm pausing just to give you a second to think about it because most of you think the intention of the parties, but you forget about the inadvertent portion of it. You can create an agency relationship simply by the words that you use, the actions that you take, which imply agency. Ugh. Here, I'll grunt for y'all. Here's one that occasionally does come up. Most of us don't have to worry about this, but by a court of law, the judge can order someone be represented. So here's what we're all pretty much familiar with: express agency. Now, whether or not you knew that, that's what we always do, don't we? Meaning we've got it contractually, it's on paper. We've been directed and have agreed to represent a party in writing. Now, here's the big oops, the caution sign. We've already said through our words, through our actions, we can imply agency. In knowing what we do know of dual agency, sometimes we don't know that we've created it because we did an implied agency. Through our words, through our actions, we've implied that we represent. Here's a scenario. Talking with the buyer, they're a little bit reluctant, not real certain, and as simple as this. Well, don't worry about it then. I'll take care of everything. And then you sign an agency disclosure that you represent the buyer and have the buyer sign. Do you represent the buyer? At this point, have you represented the buyer? What say you? Jess, I saw those lips. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Who agrees with Jess? All right. My buddy there in Sterling Heights, he's standing out all by himself. The other two won't commit. Yes, guys, you've implied agency. Therefore, well, here, you've heard it: walk like a duck, talk like a duck. You might be a duck. Well, in real estate, walk like an agent, talk like an agent. You are an agent. This is not a good thing, and this is where we create an undisclosed dual agency, and that's where we can get in trouble. Go ahead, Jess.
Okay. So this is going back to when you were talking about in writing,
Mm-hmm.
and it applies here too. What constitutes writing? Does it have to be a contract? Could it be an exchange of texts or emails?
We want to look at it this way. In writing could be potentially created through an email. Courts apparently are not recognizing text messages as, I'm going to say, delivery. But I believe in writing has to be signed, and can it be signed by email? Yep, we do it all the time. It's really the delivery of a contract. Delivery. So
So,
when the parties have received it,
so they don't have to acknowledge it? Or I would assume that they would acknowledge if you text to say, okay, so pursuant to our conversation, uh, so I'm going to write up the papers to that you're representing. And they're like, yeah, great, go for it.
I
And
would
they
say
decide to
more.
send it. they've maybe changed their mind, then
Yeah, I would say more in that case, Jess, what we're dealing with is implied.
okay.
You're bound because you said I am. Your actions have done that. Where email really comes in is for delivery of acceptance. So when we're talking real estate contracts, it's really the purchase agreement. You have offer, acceptance, but it's not binding until delivery. So an email, once you hit send, it's delivered, it's just become binding. But when it comes to the aspect of being an express agency, we want the contract which actually outlines all of the details, and therefore a simple email with, okay, I'll represent you. I'm probably sending a contract with that. But through our words and through our actions, we are already representing. So let me clarify it with the clearest example, because this is what happens all the time. If we're doing everything correctly, we're disclosing in writing before we sign the contract. So when we sign Form K, agency disclosure, that we represent the party, we have an implied agency at that moment. So anytime we disclose we represent someone, the next document they sign needs to be either the listing contract or the buyer representation contract. So now we've eliminated the implied agency. We absolutely represent. All right. Does that make sense? Awesome. All right. Well, continuing on. Here's what we need to know about our company. Our company is a designated agency company. Now, there's a bit of confusion. So if you are gold, you are designated within gold. Blue, you are separate. Although HRC, there's HRC Realty and there's HRC Realty 2. So there's two separate brokerages. Therefore, we don't cross over in what we're talking about for dual agency. It would only be in Coldwell Banker professionals or all of you that are in Century 21 professionals. But if those two cross over in a transaction, we're still separate. There is not going to be dual agency. But let's talk designated agency first, make sure that we understand. Back in the day, pre-1995, all realtors represented the seller. If you ever wondered how did we ever get to the point where a seller would pay a buyer's broker's fee, go pre-1995. All agents represented the sellers. 1995, it became law in the state of Michigan and pretty much went throughout the United States that we must disclose in writing our relationship to all parties. As such, we began representing buyers. Then somebody said, well, wait a minute, this is really stupid. Just because Cliff is there in Sterling Heights, and let's see, anybody Livonia? Well, anyway, I've got somebody over in Livonia, same office, same broker, two different supervisory brokers. But when Cliff took a listing, everybody in the Livonia office represented the buyer or the seller. Everybody did. And somebody said, well, that doesn't make sense. Because how could Cliff and know everything that Joe knows and Joe know everything that Cliff knows when neither one of them met the other person's client. So they said, okay, well, let's let the brokerage designate a single agent, or maybe two, maybe three, but we'll designate who actually represents within that company. So only the individual or individuals who have been designated represent. Now, that's where you got to keep it separate. If the other party in transaction is represented by an affiliate licensee, otherwise, if Cliff, then there's Joe over in Livonia, both represent, one the seller with the other the buyer, the licensee's broker and all supervisory brokerage. Otherwise, in their case, Century 21 Professionals, the corporation, represents both buyers. The supervisory brokers, Scott Rose, Jeff Leach, they both represent and are disclosed consensual dual agents. The brokerage and the supervisory broker, but not the individual agents who have been designated. Why? Because the broker has all of the information. Supervisory brokers have all of the information. Why are all the files locked up? Now it's for obvious reasons. So we can't have Marietta looking through the files and catching all the information about Cliff's clients, or vice versa, or anywhere else in the office. They need to be locked up. How's everybody doing with it? I have a lot of head shaking positively. Everybody's good? So what is a supervisory broker? And this is where I say, guys, there's just what is written, because when they came up with all of this, they couldn't think of all of the scenarios. The supervisory broker is an associate broker. That means they have a broker's license, but because they're working within a company that has a principal broker, they're an associate broker, and they provide supervisory assistance to or of all agents within that company. So the supervisory broker helps one or more designated agents within the representation of those clients. So the supervisory broker has all of the information that Cliff and Joe have. They know all of that. And I should have updated this. I think this is paragraph 47 on the purchase agreement. If you ever wondered why we're going, who is who? Do we have both sides within the company? This is where we are disclosing that the brokerage and the supervisory broker is a dual agent. And I wish I'd have noticed I had the old paperwork on here. I would have given you the new stuff. But does everybody know what I'm referring to here? We just updated this to provide a little more clarity that is it within the brokerage or not? The reason that it is there is really simple. Disclosure of the dual agency for the supervisory brokers. If it's in-house, then it says this is a sole transaction of Coldwell Anchor Professionals. This is a sole transaction of Century 21 Professionals, and therefore the broker and all named supervisory brokers are acting as dual agents. We've redisclosed for those individuals. How's
Question.
everybody with this one? Deb?
You've mentioned a couple times now the broker and the supervisory broker, who is the associate broker. The associate broker slash supervisory broker for me, of course, is Erica. But what's the difference between the associate broker and the broker? I
That is a great question. I'm glad that,
I've not met the broker. I thought the broker was Erica because she runs our office.
well, we say broker for short. You'll always hear me using the term managing broker. Okay. Um, you'll never meet the broker. They're a non-living entity.
That's what I thought. That's yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. In reality, they're a non-living entity, and there's what we call the principal broker. So the principal broker is Chris Hendricks. So if any of us screw up and end up in jail, probably Chris will end up there with us.
And he's the president, right?
Yeah, he's president, and we'll call him principal. But definitely for the time conference, the inference that we're giving, he is the principal broker, meaning he's principally responsible, but he's assigned Erica as the associate broker. But again, we use broker just in short.
Right.
That means she's responsible too.
Right. So then, just so I'm clear, because I've already had this training with Erica, in our designated agency where the fiduciary duties and the confidentiality with a client stay within myself as the agent, Erica as my supervisory slash associate broker, then Chris, Mr. Hendricks, would be included in that little sphere of designated people who have the right to confidential information.
You got it. Two
Great.
thumbs up on that.
Great.
You nailed it.
Thank you.
Yep. Jess?
Okay. So just to tag along with what Deb was saying. So this is what I'm understanding. A dual agency will exist within the principal brokerage, which could be the two, it's or within the supervisory brokerage, right? So within like my office and Grosse Point, if another agent or me is representing both. Okay, that's two questions. Um, so
So, yeah, I gotta, where's my black felt tip fine
I
point
kind
marker?
I kind of get that what you're trying to say. So because we're a designated agency, then if we create a dual agency with a handling the seller and the buyer, then it's us, our associate broker, and our principal broker are still within that.
Well, you're a wee bit ahead,
Okay.
but let me see if, okay, I did this the other day, but I think I need to. So let me stop my share. And
this is what I was asking. Does that, can you read that?
you're kind of coming in there. Yes. Let me throw this a little bit different. I got to get rid of my background to help make this make sense. Appearance, no. Backgrounds, none. All right. There you get to see. Oh, good. It's not showing everything. Otherwise, you'd see how much of a mess I got here. All right. Here we go. So up here at the top, I'm just going to leave it as HRC, but we know there's actually two separate brokers. So we're going to draw it for whichever one that I'm in. If I'm blue or gold, there's HRC. Well, right underneath that is Chris Hendricks. And Chris Hendricks is the principal broker. He's the guy that is responsible for all things that happen within your brokerage. Well, underneath that, you have all of these offices, and I'll just leave it as 3, but we've got 22 total, but we know we have 7, I think, on the gold side, and what we have, well, whatever that is, 14, 15 on the blue. And take your office, So we've been using Erica. So here's Erica. She's in the next in line for responsibility. So when we talk and use the term named supervisory broker, we're either putting our managing broker, who is an associate broker, or in a case like Holly, uh, managers can also be salespeople. Everybody should remember that from their pre-license training. Managers can be salespeople. But here's one of the things that they didn't think about when they created these laws. They said a supervisory broker must be an associate broker. Yet a manager can be a licensee. You see the issues here.
Yeah,
They got all the same information. So here's what we're having. I've got my managing broker, or in the case if my manager is a salesperson who doesn't hold the associate broker, I put Chris Hendricks here. Whoever is that label on your agreements that you've been told to put in that spot, they are the supervisory broker. Does that help? Everybody from this level up represents all of the people of all of their designated agents. So if there's a contract, that all of these individuals, this level up, all represent the clients. Therefore, if you understand that, it really becomes simple.
And that's for both agency relationship and dual agency, which is an agency relationship.
Well, yeah, it's just another level because in simple, we'll move forward on this quickly. Dual agency says that that party represents both parties to that transaction. That's why this, I'm pointing, now it's not there, but the aspect of being on the purchase agreement, that this is an in-house transaction, it's because we must redisclose. Well, all of the supervisory brokers, the broker, they become a dual agent. They take on the responsibilities of a dual agent because they have access to all information. They represent everybody because if you will, guys, if Joe in Birmingham takes a listing, Joe is the only one who represents them, but Joe took it on behalf of the broker. It is the broker's listing. It is the broker's buyer. So you see, when you remember that, Joe is just the one designated to represent them, but it's already the broker's listing. Joe took the listing. You took the listing on behalf of the broker. Obviously, then, the broker represents them. The broker obviously represents all parties who signed a contract because we as designated agents accepted the contract on behalf of the brokerage. So the brokerage and all supervisory brokers represent all parties. But at the lowest level, common denominator, the designated agent does not represent all parties.
Whoa, what?
The
The designated
designated agent does not represent all parties with
above us.
all the contracts within the brokerage.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yep. Only for the ones where you have been designated. And how do you get designated? By going and getting a buyer to sign a contract. Buyer or seller, they sign a contract, you know you're the designated agent. Lisa?
It's just funny how this comes up because I was just bringing this up to an agent that I spoke with. He's here today, I believe, but I'm out of county but I'm within the same office as another agent. So if I refer to them, a referral of a prospective buyer, they have the listing because I'm unable to show the property. Or I can refer it to an agent within our office as a designated buyer's agent. But if the listing agent took the referral, wouldn't he then become a dual agent? You'd have to sign a dual agency agreement with both the listing client and then the prospective buyer, correct?
Uh,
Or am I confused?
it's one of the, I don't know what's the word to use. It's one of the, I'm going to call it misunderstanding.
Okay.
So Lisa, if you hold on to that thought, make a note. Um, I'm going to bring up scenarios
Yep.
and I'm going to have you bring that one back up
Okay.
if I don't already have it in here. But
Yep.
that's one of the common misunderstandings is when I have a listing and a buyer comes along, I become a dual agent. So we'll
Not
come back to that.
automatically. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So moving on from there. Agency types, guys. We all know what a seller's agent is. You represent the seller. And there's some big words that I put in here, but because it's really focus on dual, seller's agent represents the seller. So what's a buyer's agent? In our case, just like the seller, someone who's been designated to represent the buyer. We're designated because we've done an agency disclosure and we have a signed contract. And that signed contract says the designated agent is you. And oh, by the way, here's my supervisory broker. It's all in the contracts.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, then there's this thing called a dual agent. And if we understand, we have a seller's contract that doing everything properly, I doing everything properly, we have a signed contract representing a seller. We have a buyer, we have a signed contract representing the buyer. Now, I want you to write down wherever you're taking your notes, representing, put it all in capital, all capital letters, representing. Because we're going to assume we're going to wipe out implied agency, although we know and understand it, but we're never going to do anything to let that happen. So we have written contracts representing. Here's what it says. A real estate licensee can be the agent of both the seller and the buyer in a transaction. That means we're representing both. We can, but only with the knowledge and informed consent in writing of both seller and buyer. In such a case, the licensee will not be able to disclose. This is just clarifying what you can and cannot do. Disclosure is always at a 100%. You cannot disclose anything. My words, that would be harmful to either party's negotiating position. Confidentiality is 100%. Non-disclosure is 100%. Otherwise, confidentiality rules, disclosure duties are limited. As a dual agent, the licensee will not be able to provide the full range of fiduciary duties to the seller or the buyer, of which, in this case, what's the worry? I'm going to be a little bit sarcastic here, but most of you don't know what your fiduciary responsibilities are anyway. Should I test them, Cliff? By the way, whenever you hear, I always have to do this, and the guys heard me this morning. This is your coach just showing you some love. Well, I've been around enough to go, if I said, what are your fiduciary responsibilities? I bet I get maybe 10% of you could tell me all 6 of them. Okay? So, not going to worry about that right now. But the key, confidentiality stays at 100%. Obviously, if you represent two parties, you can't have 100% loyalty to both. Oh, I just gave you three of them. Obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accountability, reasonable care. Now, here's what you need to catch. Let me go back on that slide. Let me be clear now. Dual agency only happens for you as an agent when you have both parties represented in a single transaction. Dual agency only occurs when you as an agent represent in writing, because again, we're assuming we're doing it right. We're wiping out implied agency. But the key is representing both parties in the same transaction. So, Lisa, let me come back to you now and see if with that definition, if that gave clarity to your scenario.
Well, that's what I thought. Or did I not explain it right?
Well, just I think it was. Well, let me just say
If I
it was a little
refer to
muddy
the listing, if
in
I-
regards to the scenario.
okay.
So
If it
let
re- okay.
so let's take it and give clarity. Lisa has a listing, and a buyer comes along and says, "I want to buy the house." Does Lisa represent both parties?
Not yet.
And proper, I think you said Lisa, not yet. You're correct.
Yep. Mhm.
Lisa wants to avoid having both sides to avoid any potential of dual agency, so she refers it to somebody else in the office.
Right.
Is there dual agency for Lisa?
No.
Nope. Is there dual agency for the other agent?
No.
Nope, because Lisa's designated to represent the seller, and we assume that the buyer's agent we referred to is signing a contract and representing the buyer. But who does hold dual agency because it's in the company?
The supervisory manager or brokers.
You got it.
Okay, but this is my question.
Okay.
So if I did not establish a relationship and I'm referring a buyer to a listing agent, that listing agent has either they can, well, I'll
Okay,
refer them,
So you
but
don't, let me clarify just to
yeah,
make,
that's what I'm saying.
so if you are not the listing agent,
Right.
but have a buyer,
Correct.
but you can't show it,
Correct. So I refer it
I
to the listing
referred
agent
it to the listing
or
agent.
another agent to designate them as a buyer. But who makes that decision? I don't want them to, you know what I'm saying?
I'm gonna say in simple, Lisa, you got lots of experience. So here's where you would go with it. You're just gonna say, hey, Marietta, I got somebody who wants to see your house, but I'm out of town. Could you show it to them? The answer is yes. And so Marietta shows the house. She doesn't need to be designated. She doesn't need to do a disclosure. She doesn't have to have a representation agreement because she represents the seller. So a contract is not necessary by terms of the settlement because she is the seller's agent. Therefore, you would still be able to represent the buyer. We'd have you as the designated agent of the buyer, Marietta as the designated agent of the seller, supervisory brokers, it's in-house. They are
So
under
if I
dual
wanted-
agency.
Yeah. So if I wanted to make a referral, do I then decide if I want to refer it to someone as a buyer's agent? Or do I just give the
The answer would,
referral to the listing
yeah,
agent
you
and
could
let
do
them
that. You
decide
could
what
take
they
a
want to do?
referral fee. Maybe it's talk with the manager and say, hey, what should I do with this? You know, look, they're always going to, we always want to make sure that we leave it in house, but they're going to help guide you
Yeah.
in regards to what the best thing or the best person may be.
Darwin?
I have a few questions. And it's kind of, I think John from Shelby asked that question. Can you explain when a person comes through your open house, for example, right? And they want
Ah,
to, so I thought that was a good question because that's
I'll
something
tell you what,
in mind.
let's do this.
Should we
When
have
it,
like our papers with us at open houses in case somebody, be prepared for that situation?
always, but
'Cause
always
I
you
would
have
love to
your,
do
your
that. That's an ideal
computers.
situation for me. I get
Yeah.
commission from both sides,
I'll
right?
tell you what,
And
let's do this. And Larry, you can jump on if it's otherwise. Let's take scenarios. I'm going to have you hold off for just a couple more slides. But if there's any other questions where we're at right now, non-scenario, and then Jess, hold yours, and then we'll come back to it when we move into scenarios. Okay? Larry, is yours?
I have a question on, you're the listing agent and somebody comes up and says, I want to buy the house. Why can you not treat them as a customer?
You can, and potentially should.
And so there's no need for a dual agency. You just move ahead. No
Key,
need, no
key
need
is
to.
this: representing both parties. There is nothing that requires us to represent the buyer.
I understand that, and you're providing the agency disclosure, showing him that you are the seller's agent, so you're
Mhm.
upfront with it. And I've heard this through the past couple of years that when somebody has that opportunity, they refer it to somebody else, and it just drives me up the wall. I'm
Um,
sorry.
like, no, but I appreciate that because it does me also. And this is some I
Thank you.
I may offend some people. Old school thinking. It was old school thinking, and I believe a lot of it is because they just didn't know how it would work. And then there's bringing in the human aspect of things.
But Darwin,
Mm-hmm.
so he doesn't get paid because he's not a buyer's agent. In the contract,
Well,
we
no, no,
say,
no,
wait a
no,
minute,
no,
in the
hold, no,
contract it
wait,
said,
wait. I can answer real quick with that. He is going to get paid because he's a listing agent if he signed a contract for full compensation.
yeah, but
Most of the time we have that.
it said that we're going to do three to the buyer's agent and three to the seller's agent. If he's a seller's agent, he's getting three. He doesn't get paid for the because he didn't sign a buyer's agency contract.
He's the listing agent and he signed a contract for 6%.
Yep.
Contract specifically states that if we bring both sides, we receive full compensation. So the contract does specify that. And by the way, remember, it's not the agent, it's the brokerage. So even if, let's see, Larry and Jason are in the same office, Larry has the listing, Jason sells it. The brokerage is still going to collect 6%. However, however, if Jason's buyer contract, for some reason he was silly and signed it for 2%, the seller's only going to pay 5. Larry's going to get his 3, Jason's going to get his 2. But remember this, if Larry has both sides and he's representing only the seller, Larry's going to get whatever he signed a seller up for. So if he signed him for 6, he's got both sides, he gets the 6%.
Well, plus if there's no if there's no buyer, he doesn't have to pay him anything. He collects the 6%, the listing contract.
Yep.
Now
Because
let
that's
me,
what it,
you brought
yeah,
up
you
something
read that.
here.
It's very clearly stated that if we have both sides, the brokerage collects the 6%.
All right, let me interrupt you for a second because this almost came to fruition here where somebody, I signed the listing contract for 6. The offer came in that the buyer's agent only wanted to collect 2.5% for whatever reason.
Good for you.
Would I not get 3.5% then?
As a brokerage, I think we've gone to the point that we know that when we say 6, we're talking, and if we were given 3, we were only keeping 3. We should not benefit because of I'm going to say it, weak agent.
See, so that's where I was going back to, because I thought that if it said 3, you could only get 3. If the other one said 2.5, you couldn't pick up the other half. So that's why this is a little confusing, because I thought we
Yeah.
had this conversation before.
So, let me give clarity to that.
That was my
So the
understanding as
settlement,
well.
the settlement states that for the buyer, again, the attorneys were happy. They made millions of dollars. DOJ was happy because they don't like the realtor organization. They're trying to break it up. So that's what the settlement, in my opinion, was all about. Because in the end, guys, what's changed? Nothing. Other than you have to sign a contract with the buyer if you don't represent the buyer or the seller. But they stated very clearly that we cannot accept, and I understand this, we cannot accept any more than what we've signed a contract for. And actually, all of our contracts have always been that way, except for the seller was offering compensation. And because it was guaranteed through the MLS that whatever was stated was what we would get paid, even though you had 2.5 with the buyer, we could get the 3 from the listing broker.
Unless, of course, you stipulate that in your buyer's representative agreement that if you don't get 3 from the selling broker, that they got to make, then they have to make up the other 0.5%.
Well,
Buyer
here's
can
what
pay.
it says. The
Oh, no,
old
the
one,
contract, yeah.
yeah, the old one and the new one. I've seen many, so I can't say that 100% this is a guarantee, but here's the way they were written. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you're responsible for seeing that I get paid 3%. Any money that I receive will be credited against this amount. That is the way the current one is written. So I want you to think about this. I've signed you up for 2.5, but the seller was offering 3. Even if you still collected the 3 based on the contract, what would happen with that extra 0.5%? It should have always gone to the buyer.
Okay.
Our contract says I get 3%. Any money that I receive from gets credited toward that amount. You see, we can't because we have a contract.
Darwin,
Yeah,
I
but
was
it's,
told
you
that
know, it's
any,
still confusing.
Hold on a second, Lydia. Let Karen jump in here.
I was told that any money left over, so if there was a 3% to the seller's agent and the buyer's agent only asked for 2, that any money left over was simply not charged to the seller. So it was the seller's money. Nothing went to the buyer.
So here's what, and I can't even say that it's written at this point, but when all this came down, we were going in the understanding that although we said 6, if we were directed, which this is what the agreement says, you are directed to offer 3% or whatever you offer, whatever's agreed upon, you are directed to offer that. And we know that we do it to buyer's agents and transaction coordinators. We don't do it to sub agents. We don't do that. And we offer the same amount to a buyer's agent and a transaction coordinator. And if it comes in less, we would only take the 3% that we were actually getting. Okay. And the reason being is that we all know that's what the original intent was. And again, we don't want to benefit because a weak agent can't negotiate their deal.
Well, who's to
What?
say it's a weak agent? Maybe he's just putting in, let's say, 2 or 2.5% to make his offer better than somebody else's.
So you just brought up the part I was going to go to, Larry.
Well, you got to be faster than that, Darwin.
I don't play pickleball like you, so it's just not, reflexes aren't.
You see, I'm dressed.
So here's what I want you to do. It's exactly what Larry said. And maybe you've done this. Competing situation to be able to make your offer appear or actually be the highest and best. You might have said, well, I'll tell you what, let me drop my compensation to 2%. Your offer isn't any better if the listing broker is going to keep that additional 1%. As a company, we're giving that money to the seller because of that kind of strategy that a buyer's agent or buyer in making their offer may have done. But if they were a weak agent, Larry, and just signed it right up front.
I only look for weak agents.
Oh, this guy does this to me all the time. Joe, go ahead.
So at my previous brokerage, I was an office manager, so I seen a lot of the paperwork that came through. And I would notice that some agents would put in a lower commission for the purchase agreement, but would still make the buyers pay the remaining commission that they agreed for on their exclusive buyer agency.
Yep. Same kind of strategy would be my guess. And so I think just know that if you're going in with that, you want to say, talk with the listing agent. Hey, are you guys set up to where if I come in with less compensation, you're not going to keep it? Because then it makes no sense. Okay. So it's a key part. But so Joe, did we take care of everything that, because I love your input with that.
Yeah.
I don't think there was a question there.
I do have another scenario as well. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. I just got a text from a new client. So over the weekend, I hosted 4 open houses, and I had a couple people that were interested in one of the houses that I did. So I met with them yesterday for about 2.5 hours, kind of going over all of the paperwork with them, what it would look like, what our process is, all that good stuff. So because that open house was for a agent within my office, I was told that I would need to disclose dual agency because I was representing the sellers hosting the open house. And I wasn't sure how to go about it, and I didn't want to confuse the buyers because they're new to the process.
So let's take the simplicity of what we've described. Was it your listing?
No.
Did you represent the buyer?
Technically, I do now.
Did you at the time?
No.
Okay. So you can't have dual agency.
Okay.
Now you represent the buyer.
Correct.
Let's say you're submitting an offer.
We did.
Great. So who represents the seller?
The listing agent out of my office.
So the listing agent doesn't represent the buyer, do they?
Correct.
So how could you have dual agency for
That's
either you or the listing agent?
Okay. So I did the right thing.
You are correct. That at that level, remember brokerage, Chris Hendricks, supervisory broker, agents. Agents are the ones that we really need to worry about disclosing. Let me show you why. And then we'll open back up for more questions. So we all know that we got to have an agency disclosure. After we do an agency disclosure, we've got to have a listing agreement or we got to have a buyer agency contract. So I want to cover a couple of things with you because it says in the listing agreement, there could be a conflict of interest. I don't know that this is the exact one, but this verbiage is in our listing contract. Somewhere in the same area, it might have dropped down and it might be 2223. But here's what it's saying. If it's a designated agent, we get to do it. And you're agreeing to allow us to do dual agency. And it's telling them in advance that the broker and supervisory brokers, if it's in-house, will be dual agents. You're agreeing in advance to allow us to do dual agency. If you've never read that paragraph, I strongly encourage you to be able to do that.
Darwin, isn't that just for the supervisory people, not for the listing agent, correct?
Well, seller understands, agrees as part of marketing. Designated agent will show all the potential properties. So it's telling them, you're not the only one. We can show all the properties of the buyer that we represent, or buyers, all homes that they may wish to see. With information, seller also understands and agrees that the designated agent could show seller's property to and obtain offers from all prospective buyers, as has an agency relationship. If the potential buyer is represented by the designated agent, brokerage firm, and a designated agent, the brokerage firm and a supervisory broker shall automatically be deemed disclosed consensual dual agents.
So, but not the listing agent. So when I take a listing and I say to my seller, I will not be a dual agent.
No, this is saying you will be.
If you were getting a divorce,
Uh-huh.
I would not represent your wife as well. So
Okay.
I will not be a dual agent. My
So as
understanding,
an agent, you're saying you won't do it.
I won't do it. And from
so
what I
you would
read,
have to correct this.
okay, from what I have read on the contract, and admittedly I've been off sick for a while, but I thought that it said that they had to agree to it.
They are signing the contract. This says this is what's happening. They're agreeing to it in advance.
Okay, I thought there was a check mark or an initial.
No, not on the listing contract or the buyer agency contract.
Okay.
So they're agreeing to it in advance. And what you would have to do, Karen, if you as an agent have decided I'm not going to do dual agency, I don't know how you could ever do it. And it may come up why. Matter of fact, it's most likely why we're great and okay with dual agency. But you'd have to cross out if a potential buyer is represented by the designated agent. Well, now it's only got to be the brokerage firm. Matter of fact, let me cover. So, Karen, you and I, brother and sister, you with me?
Yeah.
And you didn't know that I was really thinking about moving. And I decide I'm going to move. Am I going to have you list my house? My loving sister of many, many years?
I hope so.
Okay. So you represent me as a agent selling my house. Now I want to buy a house too. You want to help me?
Yes.
And then you go, well, tell me about what you two are looking for. And Cheryl and I describe a house that you have listed.
And here it is. I've been selling 30 years, Darwin. I've done a lot of double dipping, a lot.
Cool.
Only once was I ever a dual agent. And
Would this be one of them?
That was when I said to the seller that I was listing, I have a buyer looking for something just like your house. This is how it would work, but I won't show it if you don't want me to.
Yeah.
And they
In
said,
this case,
they said bring them by.
Yeah, in this case, so I took a really obvious situation. I walked Karen into a corner because obviously Karen's going to represent. But we could walk it away and remove me in the relationship that Karen and I have, and it's now just I'm a client of hers as a seller. Is she going to help me buy a home? Yep. I describe same scenario. So the only thing I've done is I've removed the familial relationship. And Karen, I don't want you to respond. This is just an open question because this scenario I always throw out. Are you telling me that you would not show me that house or that you would not represent me? I want you to think about that. Because what would be the advantage to me as the seller slash buyer to have you, the listing agent of my house, not represent me on the purchase of a house when you already know everything about me? And oh, by the way, can you disclose to your seller what you know about me? You cannot.
You cannot. And the thing that makes that, to me, a potential lawsuit is if you truly explain it correctly and you truly do it correctly, the court is not going to say, oh, well, you didn't give your brother preference.
So, yeah, and that's why, again, let me remove the familial part of it. You're telling me that because you didn't represent me, that you're safer, even though you represent me as a listing agent, and you give me to somebody else and let them represent me as a buyer's agent, you're safer. But my book,
I would say
it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Right?
I would say you are technically safer. Yes.
How? You have all the same exact knowledge. It's the same exact knowledge you've got.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You still have the same exact responsibilities.
I understand that, but to me,
okay.
When you've written the purchase agreement, that's just the step. You've still got to get through inspections and everything else. And at some point in time, it is very possible the seller is thinking you are acting for the benefit of the other person.
So, regardless of what you've done in regards to representation, at least when I'm doing dual agency and I've disclosed it, I'm legal.
Yes.
But when I'm doing dual agency and I have not disclosed it, now I'm in trouble. And that's my point. And Karen, I won't change your mind today. And I've been doing this forever, but I want to create the scenarios so that you guys can decide what is the best way for you. As a company, we're absolutely fine with it. And here's the reason. I have all of the knowledge. I have a relationship. I want these people to do business with me in the future. Above all else, I'm human. The potential is that I'm actually going to do things that would be representative anyway. Why not do it openly and fully disclosed with all parties agreeing to it? The law allows it to happen, and as a company, we're good with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Mm-hmm. So here's what I need you to know on this. You have been given permission on the listing contract to do dual agency. Okay? On the buyer representation agreement, it does the same thing. Matter of fact, by the way, have you ever been in a situation representing two buyers who want to look at the same house? The contract allows it. Oops. Oh my gosh, I'm not showing you guys. Sorry. Here I am sitting here thinking you guys are seeing the same thing. My apologies. Let's get this back up. There we go. All right. My apologies. This will help understand. So I'm sitting here going, this. Come on back. Let me get this back. Here's what I was pointing to the whole time period. So on here you have on the listing contract where it addresses and says, yes, you're agreeing to allow us to do dual agency. And it discusses the aspect of how it works with the brokerage, the supervisory broker, the broker, so on. Same thing with the buyer. Now, again, what I brought up is the aspect of, have you ever been in a situation representing two buyers and they need to see the same house? Yes. Your buyer representation contract covers that. It says, yes, I can do this. It even says it may even happen to where both buyers that I represent want to make offers. I can do that. By the way, my book, this, hear me, my book, this is dual agency. But it doesn't require disclosure. It's 1995. I said this is screwy, but you better kind of work and look at it the same way. Okay. But here's where it says, oh, by the way, there may be a conflict of interest with sellers. Otherwise, I have the listing under contract that you want to see. It's my listing. I represent the seller. You're agreeing to allow me to do that, but I have to redisclose. If I'm doing dual agent, I must redisclose.
As a listing agent.
Not if I'm a dual agent. So this says when I represent a buyer, you the buyer, so I'm pointing here, you'll see in it says when I represent you and you want to buy my house that I have listed, I'm a dual agent and I have to advise you of such. So anytime there's a change in my agency status, I must redisclose in writing. So
So
my,
you mean going from dual to representing a buyer?
well, I have to represent a buyer to be dual, and I have to represent a seller to be dual. I have to represent,
Right.
excuse me, both parties to that transaction. So I went from being a seller's agent and a buyer's agent to becoming a dual agent. Now I must redisclose because my agency relationship has changed.
But I thought you said that you don't have to disclose to a buyer, but you only need to disclose to your seller.
Nope,
Redisclose,
we
I'm
must
sorry.
always disclose in writing prior to the exchange of any confidential information in writing. The contracts, listing contract, buyer contract, says, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, here's a situation that happens, you're agreeing to allow me to do it.
Mhm.
Seller, here's a situation if you allow, if that happens, I get to do it. But now we're talking, it's happened
Okay.
and our agency relationship has changed because it has happened, and therefore we must redisclose. Anytime we have a change in our agency status, we must disclose. And in this case, it's a redisclosure because it's already done. But the agreement, and this is the part where many of you have the experience like what Karen has, which, by the way, extremely knowledgeable and an awesome agent. I don't know if I should tell her, but she's great, and very knowledgeable. So if it happens, I must redisclose, and that's the key. But it's agreed to in writing up front, and that's where some confusion comes in. People don't know that our contract says you are agreeing to allow us to do this.
Right.
And it's in the contracts. So the
Yes,
only thing
definitely.
left over really is redisclosure. So now that we have, okay, I'm in a dual agency situation, what is the paperwork necessary? My suggestion is to use this form. It's a Michigan Realtors form. You see it's PP, dual agency agreement. But let me clarify. And oh, by the way, I'll get the clarification second. Designated agency. Make sure you have that one. It's in our packages. Should be in, I know it's in SkySlope. It should be in transaction desk for all of the associations. It says dual agency agreement. But now with the discussion we've had, what do we all already know? We have the agreement. But this is a Michigan form and it's the easiest one. So they've got to call it because some companies might have to go get permission to do this. We already have it. So really we're using it for redisclosure. And it says there's this salesperson at this brokerage. Here's the seller, here's the buyer. And here's the reason I prefer to do this. It's a redisclosure for this property. If this deal doesn't come together, I'm back to just being a buyer's agent and a seller's agent. It's for this deal between these two buyers on, or these buyers, these sellers on this property. And the bottom line is, gee, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I told you that this could happen. Well, it's happened. I'm redisclosing to you that I am now a dual agent. Sign here. That's the simplicity to this form.
Hey, Darwin, now wouldn't we need to have like a mutual release from the buyer's agency contract?
No. Holly, that's an old school of thought. And by the way, with way back Coldwell Banker Professionals, that was the theory. And so that shows you how long Holly's been around. If you came from Town and Country, that was a theory. But as we discussed and updated things, what was the advantage and who do you drop? Why do I drop the buyer? What if I had the buyer first? And then think of this. We're trying to avoid dual agency, but even though you dropped them, guess what? Confidentiality. It was just like the contract existed anyway. Because you still had all the knowledge just because you dropped the contract. You still had all the knowledge. Oh, by the way, you still had that relationship, human being. You still had the feelings, the emotions. Really? You no longer represent them? That's the reason that as a company, we went with, we're safer openly practicing dual agency because the law allows it. But we have to do it correctly. So with this, no, it says, I still represent you, buyer. I still represent you, seller. That makes me a dual agent. As such, all confidential information will still be held confidential, but I can't have the full fiduciary responsibilities because I have both of you here. Think of this. If anybody ever were to, and I never have had it, I've never had it. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if I happen to have a buyer who I have under contract and they should want to buy your house, you would want me to show it to them, right? Well, what would that mean? You represent them. Well, it means I'm a dual agent. Well, I don't know if I want that. Well, why wouldn't you want that? Well, I want all of you. Well, you can't have all of me. And by the way, if you did have all of me, you wouldn't have the buyer. Well, yeah, but couldn't you have them go buy from somebody else? Well, I could have them go buy from somebody else. But guess what? I still can't tell you anything about what I know about them, and I know everything. What do they gain by you dropping? And again, Holly, the old thought was, well, we dropped the buyer. But what if you had the buyer first? Why would you drop the buyer? Shouldn't you drop the seller? You see, there's... Just weigh it out. But yeah, there again, and that's where Larry brought this up earlier. It was an old school of thought that said, don't do it. Now, let me move on.
Can I ask one other quick question?
Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
I realize this is probably a real rarity, but how do you handle situations where you are selling your own home and someone else comes in?
Your personal residence, you mean?
Yes, clearly
Okay.
you would not be a dual agent.
Correct. You are correct. Hold that, Karen, for just a moment, and we'll use that because the next up is going to be our scenarios.
Okay.
And then I'll tell you what, it's interesting. I never thought this would take this long, but you guys have been fantastic with your involvement. That shows you how important this is to us, right? Let me just show that another way of handling the paperwork. We have, again, using the dual agency agreement, simple one-page form. You're all good. Could you use the Form K? And the answer is yes. Because at this point, redisclosure would come where I am now a dual agent in a designated agency company. I sign, both buyers, both sellers sign. This is an option. The only thing is, technically, if this deal didn't come together, I'd have to go back and redisclose because I changed my relationship, but now this deal didn't come together. Now I'm back to being just a buyer's agent or a seller's agent. But does this suffice in as long as it's stating I'm a dual agent in a designated agency company and both buyers and both sellers have signed? Yes. But hopefully you can see why I'm saying I really like to just use this because the deal doesn't come together. It does the redisclosure as we need it. Everybody understands, and it's for this property between these buyers, these sellers. Okay. Now let's go to some scenarios. So Karen asked a great question. And we'll hit it because she brought it most recently, and I want to do these, and then we'll see if any others come up. And guys, if you gotta go, I understand. I really have about until 22 because I have a showing appointment at 2 o'clock. So Karen's scenario, we as real estate agents are going to sell our primary residence. Somebody walks in the door, wants to buy the house. Very clearly at this point, it makes 0 sense that I could ever possibly represent you as a buyer. It's my house. Can I really go, well, let me do what's in the best interest of you and me? We're human, people. And that's why I always bring this part up. There's the human factor that we have to take a look at. So in the case of you selling your personal residence or any property that you own, doesn't even have to be your primary, but any property you own, guys, you're only going to represent yourself. I've never been able to come up with a scenario where I'd go, I will represent me and you. Just seems humanly impossible, and that's the human factor. So what would I do? I represent me. Buyer, I can write this up for you, but know that I own this. I'm a Michigan realtor, real estate agent in reality is the way we would disclose it. I can write this up, but you need to know I am a seller's agent, and they sign an agency disclosure, checked seller's agent, designated agent. I sign it as the agent. They sign it as the buyer. Everybody good there? Karen, did that answer it?
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. So actually, as you go through this, I've got other scenarios that I create, but I always want you to weigh, do I represent or not? My choice as to what I do may depend upon you being human. Okay, let me create a couple of scenarios that we definitely want to cover. Notice I put both sides. Just means that I have one or both already under contract. In this case, you have the listing contract as a designated agent. You represent the seller. An unrepresented buyer wants to offer on the listing. How do you handle it? And what do you check off for agency disclosure? Let me give you this. You don't know this buyer from a hill of beans. What may be the best way for you to handle this? Disclosure to the buyer is?
I'm the listing agent.
And I check seller's agent, designated agent, sign here buyer.
Yes.
Okay. We already have this relationship. Why screw it up? Why limit what you owe this seller by bringing on a buyer and representing them? Doesn't make sense. But I'll give you a real scenario, and it's kind of what Karen and I used in a previous scenario. Young friend of mine, I've sold him 3 houses, a lot. I sold, 2 houses for him already. He comes into an open house, and if you understand inventory property, I don't have any personal relationship with anybody. I've never talked to the person that signed. It's a corporation. And this young man and his family that I've known sold all these properties. And if he says, I want to buy it, which he did, he says, Darwin, I love this home. I want to buy it. I've got a human portion of me. I've got all this knowledge and information about this buyer, his family. I've got a true personal relationship with him, and the other is just a corporation. Other than Karen, love you, girl. What do you think we should do? I'm seeing some lip reading and nodding. Marietta, I think you're saying represent that buyer and create the dual agency. And that's a literal situation that I had. And I want to take the polar opposites so that you can see there's not a right answer as to how you do it, but you need to know the different scenarios and how to make a decision as to whether or not to represent. Let me give you a different scenario. Let's change this one because I don't think I did it. Oh, I did. Okay. I'm flipping the coin on you now. Here's the other side. You have a buyer whom you represent. They're under contract. You're the designated agent. Part of the services you provide to a buyer whom you represent is to make sure you're aware of all the potential inventory. So you call upon for sale by owners and you go, oh, I know the home you should buy. So you call this for sale by owner. They say, sure, come on over. Buyer goes, we love it. Let's buy it. What do you disclose to the seller? What say you? It's the same thing. Represent the buyer. I love to throw this one out because people go, well, how do you not represent the seller? The same way I don't represent the buyer. I just flipped the scenario. And it really becomes pretty obvious, doesn't it? By the way, who signed to pay you? The buyer or the seller? The buyer. You don't need to sign the seller. You don't even need, whoops. Peter, you're just a touch ahead of me. You don't even need a one-party agreement. You've already got a signed agreement from a buyer who says, I'll pay you. It's up to them to see how you get paid, but how are they going to pay you? Most likely. If they're financing, they're going to put it on the purchase agreement. Seller, need you to compensate 3% to be applied toward the buyer's broker's compensation. So we don't even need the old days where we'd go get that one-party agreement. We don't need it anymore. Buyers put it right on a purchase agreement. It's up to them, but if they're paying cash, they'll probably pay the compensation themselves. We don't need to represent the seller. That's when it always brings a lot of quietness.
Mhm.
So let's see. John, you brought up the aspect of an open house. So I'm going to present to you with the settlement how we do this. There's a listing contract. You are the agent. You hold an open house. You're the listing agent holding an open house. Buyer says, I want to buy it. Or you're the non-seller designated agent. See you, Cliff. Have a great one, bud. You're the non-designated agent who's holding another agent, designated agent's listing open. Can't remember how I did these. Let me just go back and we'll talk about it here. Guys, a listing agent, it says, when I hold my house open, the settlement states I don't need to have a agreement signed prior to touring a home with a buyer. State law says you still have to disclose, but we've never done that. No need for disclosure, yes. Buyer contract, no. You're there representing the seller. As a non-designated agent, settlement says, because I'm not designated, I don't represent the buyer, I don't represent the seller, then the settlement states you must get an agreement signed prior to touring the home. So if we're living up to the terms of the settlement, it's a bit of a pain in the butt to go, buyer, before you can come through the open house, I need you to sign this agreement. But before you sign that, you got to sign this agency disclosure. Oh, by the way, if you buy this house, you're going to see that I get paid 3%.
Hey, Darwin, I have well, what happens if you're holding an open house for an agent and all of a sudden your buyer walks in that you were not expecting to show up at your open house that you're holding for the other agent?
That you represent?
Yes.
No problem, because you're not there on behalf of the seller in that scenario. Unless, so let me break that down, Holly, if that makes sense there so far. I'll go to the unless. Unless I'm holding open somebody else's listing and I was designated now to represent the seller.
Yes, that's what I mean. You're
Okay.
designated to represent the seller, and all of a sudden your buyer that you were not expecting walks into the open house and they said, "Oh, we love it." You're thinking, "Well, this wasn't in your criteria when I was doing the search for you." So what happens there?
I think, pardon me, I'm trying to start my truck. Work, it did. Okay. So, Holly, I'm going to have you answer the question. Do you represent the seller?
Technically, no.
Oh, wait a minute. You said you were designated.
Well, I was designated by the listing agent. Yeah.
Technically.
Yes, I do. Technically, yes. Emotionally, no.
Uh-huh. So right. This is tough, but you already know the answer because you already represent the buyer. So
Yeah.
what do you have to do?
I have to disclose to the buyer that I represent the seller now in this transaction.
And therefore I'm
a dual agent.
There you go.
But
and
then that
therefore
would
you
muddy
must
up the
you must redisclose.
Okay, this sort of makes it confusing because I'm now representing the seller, sort of the listing agent.
No.
The commission part of it.
You're going into what you know.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what you know, it's what you are. And because you were designated, to make it simple, you represent the seller.
So, Darwin, it's Karen again.
Yep.
So if to make a open house simplified, I added someone else as
great way to put it, by the way.
I added someone else to hold the open house.
And we should do it in writing if we do this.
Yes. And then I recruise them later and say,
Otherwise, I take them back off.
yes, they are no longer representing the seller. Wouldn't that be the simpler thing to do?
It's one of the things that I always say is, when do the duties of confidentiality expire?
Well, here's the thing, as if I'm hiring somebody to hold an open house,
Okay,
other than telling them about the property, I'm not sharing any information.
right.
So they don't have confidentiality issues because I have
Well,
not shared anything.
They don't, but they do. Because you put it out there. I'm in front of a judge, and I'm going to say, so did you ever represent them? Well, yes. So did you? Somewhere, all they got to do is bring that you were at one time. How do you no longer? Are you telling me you didn't have that knowledge? So you didn't have that. You're saying you didn't have, did he? There's so much that comes from it. Bottom line, could you say this person is designated for this day? Yes. Would it
And
change
even
Holly's scenario?
even potentially in a non-agent capacity, you know.
Nope, can't do it. They're either representing or they're not. Because if they're not representing, they have to have the buyer sign a contract. Because that's what the settlement says. And here, can I throw this out? The company hasn't done a policy stance regarding this. They've left it to the managers and the district managers to make a decision as to how at the office level it would be handled. As Chris puts it, he said, I don't foresee this becoming an issue at this time period, and if it does, then I'm the guy that's going to be wearing the orange jumpsuit in prison. So it's not out there. So what I'm presenting to you is by terms of the settlement.
Okay.
Okay. So if you have this scenario, find out from the office manager, the managing broker, how they want you to handle this. And I think, John, that's why you probably brought this up in the first place, because it has not come down as a policy. But I want all of you to know and understand that by terms of the settlement, what it states we should and how we should. Okay. Good question. And guys, I'll tell you what, we could go on, and obviously we brought up a whole lot of other scenarios, and would love to keep on talking. This stuff I just have fun with. And I've had to change some opinions over the years as to dual agency. And Karen, I thank you for your position. I always love it when I have somebody that can actually debate the other side of it, because I think it makes sense that you hear both sides of it, and through there what you decide to do as an individual and as a company, where the company is, and stating that it's okay, but do it the right way. That's the biggie. All right. So this was not your normal Hot Topic Tuesday. This was an hour and 36 minutes of Hot Topic, but I hope it was worth it for you guys. I appreciate all of you. I'll get this up there as soon as possible in regards to the HRC Agent Development Channel. But guys, have a great one. Wish me the best. I'll see if I can get this thing sold today.